Welcome, one and all, from wherever you are in the world, to the second episode in our series of circular table talks brought to you by We Don't Have Time, the world's largest review app for climate solutions and climate action, and the progressive waste management company Rag & Cells. Viewers should download our app, leave reviews and ask questions to our speakers in the comments section for this event by going to wedon'thavetime.org.
Hi, I'm Ingmar Renzo and I'm the founder of We Don't Have Time. We are a social network platform and a review platform for the climate. And what you could do on our platform is you could give reviews to leaders, corporate leaders, political leaders about what they do, good or bad, for the climate. So if you see something that you don't like, you could give them a climate warning, and we will send this climate warning to the leader and have them to answer, have them to change, and put pressure on that issue. But you could also send climate love. If you see something that someone that are doing something great for the climate, and to encourage that and to share that to the world so more people will look up to that action and do the same. And I think love is actually something that could work very, very well in order to solve the climate crisis. We can't just focus on the problem. We must also focus on the good action, what's actually out there that are working for solutions. And how this works, I could just show you a little bit examples here. Here is a climate love from a company called Houdini that actually have given a climate love to an NGO called Ecocide Law of Alliance, because they want business leaders to be involved to make ecocide law so that it will be criminal to destroy nature. And this is something driven by a company on our platform. So this is the upside down. The company are giving love to the non-profit. But we have also a lot of private individuals on our platform. And this is a climate love from our user Muhammad to an organization called Rubicon, because what Rubicon is a company that actually has a solution to the waste problem using artificial intelligence. And that is something that needs to be implemented on scale in many, many cities. So if you log into the We Don't Have Time platform, you could give climate love wherever you see someone doing something great for the climate. And you could be inspired of so many other people around the world acting and working for change.
This series is focusing and discussing how a circular economy can critically contribute to a sustainable future for every man, woman, and child. In the first episode, a few months ago, we looked at one of the perhaps tougher topics, and that is carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas. Can a circular economy transform it from villain to hero? Can it be reused in a way that helps the climate, the economy, and society? Today, our second episode is looking at wastewater. Every drop counts. But something perhaps few people, even watching this show, and especially in richer countries, ever really think about, unless they get a leak in the bathroom or maybe an algal bloom is seen off the coast. But wastewater is packed with nutrients, substances, materials like phosphorus and nitrogen that, if harvested and circled back into use rather than flushed away, could transform, for example, the sustainability of agriculture, play its part in combating climate change, and helping deal with increasing water security and safety. Among other multiple environmental economic benefits, this is a big topic. My name is Nick Nuttall from We Don't Have Time, and I'm your co-host for today's show. We're going to hear some great keynote speakers. Before we do that, though, however, we're going to start with a welcome remark from my co-host, and that's Per Larssons, for his opening remarks from Rag & Cells. Per is Director of Sustainability for Rag & Cells, and that's a leading Nordic waste management company. It really has transformed and is transforming itself to become a key player in a sustainable 21st century. He's also an advisor to 2 Swedish ministries. Per, over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Today we will focus on adaptation and mitigation. That is also 2 of the most important topics at the upcoming COP26 conference, soon to be held in Glasgow. In our talk today, we will focus on the possibilities that wastewater treatment plant in the world has to contribute to both those aspects. Let's first talk about adaptation. At the warmer globe, our lakes and oceans will risk eutrophication, and that has the potential to take away the oxygen from our seabeds, and in the very far end lead to that oceans transform from today's carbon sinks to start to emit carbon emissions. We need to make sure that this does not happen. So these wastewater treatment plants will need to take out more nitrogen and phosphorus from the wastewater, and that is the adaptation. When it comes to mitigation, reduce the amount of carbon dioxide being emitted to the atmosphere, we end up in a problem. When extracting the nitrogen with today's method out of the wastewater with our current biological method that are used, we see that we have laughing gas emissions. And there's nothing to laugh about, because here we talk about the climate emissions that are 300 times as high as carbon dioxide. And a recent study done both in Sweden and Denmark separately, we see that if you extract nitrogen out of wastewater and will increase that, the amount of laughing gas can be up to 10 times as high as previously thought. With new technology available and with high ambitions from wastewater treatment plants in today's linear economy, an ambition to convert the plants into resource plants instead has been developed as a part of a work at the Swedish Ministry of Industry in Sweden. So I believe in the future, in the circular economy, resource treatment plant will be able both to adapt and mitigate. So therefore, I'm really interested to listen to all your keynote speakers today and the panel in the end about the possibilities going forward. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed, Per. Let's now go over to Jan to hear his comments on what he's just heard.
Thank you, Niklas. Now, I fully support the view of Per in that, wastewater treatment plants can become resource plants. I mean, all the things are there, except for maybe 2 things. One is that you need a technology that can actually catch all the resources. And then you will also need a legislation that actually makes them valuable and sellable. And that we are still missing. And of course, not only all resources, but phosphorus is one of the really important resources there. And I'm sure later in the program you will hear more about that. But I mean, it's both a health issue, it's a climate issue, it's an environmental issue, and it's a security of supply issue for the European food industry. So a very key and elemental resource that actually is in the wastewater already. But today there is technologies that can catch, that was not there 20 years ago, but that can catch phosphorus and in a very pure form and to be applied in a pure form. The main issue we have with legislation today is that it actually focuses on the origin of the resource and not on the quality. But of course, it makes all the sense that if it's a same or higher quality product, should be able to use just because it comes from wastewater. So I think this is one of the key elements of the new legislation that is required. So unfortunately, present legislation totally linear and based on the linear economy is not based on circular. So I call for legislators really to start to legislate and to facilitate the turn to circular economy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jan. Now we'd like to hear some remarks from Per Larssons about what he's heard as well.
Thank you, Nick. What I see is that the policy recommendations was handed over to the Minister of Industry and the Minister of Environment in Sweden. And those consist of 8 principles needed to be implemented in order to create those resource plans that both Swedish Water and the CEO Easy Mining spoke about. We also did have the opportunity to hand them over to the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe at their 69th Commission meeting, where 56 nations, member states, were discussing how to implement the circular economy. I really like the ambitions that the Swedish wastewater has, together with all their wastewater utilities, that they would like to become resource treatment plants. And if I would like to stress something, again, quality needs to come before origin. In the program, we will now listen to people from the globe, from the UN perspective. We will also listen to people from EU policies, but then in the end, and that's very important, listen to other wastewater utilities around in Europe. What are their perspective? How do they see on the proposal from Swedish Water and DC Mining? So looking forward to the next part of the show.
Thanks a lot, Per. And just stay with us a second, because before we turn to our keynote speakers, we have an announcement to get the show rolling. Let me introduce Jan Schward, the CEO of a company called Easy Mining, which we will learn more of later, and also Per Dahlheim, who's the CEO of the Swedish Water and Wastewater Association. And along with you, Per, gentlemen, I saw that you had an announcement in the schedule, and I'm very intrigued. Please give us your announcement.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for being invited and highlighting this important topic. My name is Per Dahlheim, and I'm the CEO of Swedish Water. Swedish Water represents 290 municipalities when it comes to handle drinking water and wastewater treatment. We work on a daily basis to contribute to the circular economy and the long-term sustainability. The conditions, however, for delivering sustainable water service has changed. Few other mass flows are as large as in the water and sewage sector. We can identify a number of resources in the wastewater that can be utilized in the circular economy. This is good news for the sustainable society, both in everyday life, but also in crisis. Today's sewage is tomorrow's resources. Today's treatment plants is tomorrow's resource plants. With production of biogas and reuse of nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. Today's wastewater is tomorrow's water resources for industry and agriculture. I would say there is no more waste water. There is a new era of water products with different benefits. We want to broaden today's assignment in the water industry and go beyond today's delivery. I strongly believe that a sustainable future holds business models based on circular economy and at the same time make significant cost savings and extended value. So please let us continue the road to a true circular economy together. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Per Larsens, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think it's brilliant, and Swedish Water is one of the co-signers of the ambitions when it comes to how resource treatment plant can be implemented, because there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of hurdles that we need to deal with. And I think that John has some favorite things that we need to address the politicians with.
Thanks very much. Well, that's very exciting. And from wastewater treatment plants to resource plants, that's a glimpse into the future that we clearly need. Our first keynote speaker is Dr. Mansour Kadir, and he is the Water and Human Development, or at the Water and Human Development Program at the UN University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. It's known as the UN's think tank on water. And Dr. Kadir is Assistant Director, but also Deputy Director. He has a PhD from the University of Agriculture, Soil and Environmental Sciences at Faisalabad in Pakistan, and his postdoctorate is from the Justus Liebig University in Gießen, Germany. He has led some of the most important and contributed to some of the most significant reports on the world's water quality. And above all, for this show, he really is a top expert on wastewater, both the quantity, the impacts, and also solutions. Mansour, we're delighted to give you the floor on the challenge of wastewater from a global perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick, for the kind introductions. wastewater generated by households, industries, and municipal sector is of crucial importance because of the resources it does contain, such as water, nutrients, and energy. And if we look at the most recent global assessments of wastewater production at the global level, the world at large produces 380 billion cubic meters or 380 trillion liters of wastewater, which is basically a volume which is 5 times the volume of Niagara Falls that passes through this lake with that massive volume of water. Or some of you who are interested in river basin volumes, this volume is 7 times the volume of water that enters Egypt through River Nile to meet the domestic, industrial, and agricultural needs of 100 million population of the country. As a source of irrigation, if we just consider wastewater as a water resource, it is sufficient to irrigate 42 million hectares of land, even without dilution, and considering 2 crops per year. The volumes of municipal wastewater are set to increase. We project that by the year 2030, the global volume of wastewater will reach 470 billion cubic meters, which is basically 20% increase over the 2015 level. And by the year 2050, the wastewater volumes are expected to reach by 574 billion cubic meters, which is 51% over the 2015 level. As wastewater is a rich carrier of nutrients, it does contain variety of nutrients, but just considering 3 key nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, wastewater contains 26 teragrams of these 3 nutrients collectively. If we remove all these nutrients, their mass is equivalent to 78 times the mass of this massive Empire State Building in the US. And if we recover all these nutrients, basically they can offset 13% of the global fertilizer requirement, while also generating $13 billion of US, 13 billion US dollars. Beyond nutrient recovery, if we recover all the nutrients, there are environmental gains as well, such as in the form of minimizing or even eliminating the issues like eutrophication. At the energy front, wastewater does contain more energy than is required for its treatment. So if we harvest all the energy which is embedded in wastewater, we can power all the wastewater treatment plants. Or in other terms, this energy is sufficient to meet the domestic needs of 158 million households, or in other words, 500 million global population. While these aspects reveal very promising aspects of wastewater in terms of recovery of nutrients, water, and energy, but if we look at the progress on the ground, we are far from achieving its potential. The challenge is that still today, large volumes of wastewater are disposed of to the environment in untreated form. Most recent estimates suggest that almost half of the wastewater that we produce globally is disposed of to the freshwater bodies, pumped to the groundwater or pushed to the groundwater, and they are creating more environmental and health risks than really getting some benefit out of that. The situation is really gloomy, particularly in low-income countries, which hardly treat 10% of their wastewater that is produced within their boundaries. If we look at the lower middle-income countries, they just treat 1/4 of the wastewater that is produced within their territories. So here there is an opportunity for us that we can move forward and harness the potential of wastewater in terms of its recovery from a recovery of water, nutrients, and energy, and considering it as a resource, not a waste. So there are even benefits beyond nutrient recovery. I'm quite sure most of you might have seen through news media that the wastewater treatment plants more recently have become detection of COVID-19. And in those countries where we do not have wastewater treatment plants, or they are not functional, or there are no wastewater collection systems, here we are missing a great opportunity even for disease early warning systems. So it's up to us how we decide whether we still continue to consider it as a waste, or we move forward and consider it as a resource, and then accordingly strategize in a way that ensures that end of the day we find it a valuable resource of water, nutrients, and energy, and we harness its full potential. Thank you.
Mansoor, thank you very much indeed for that. That was really fascinating, and I think it's worth reflecting on the global level. We know that every country is different, and we know that there's a different story in a sense to tell in Europe, but they are related in many ways. And these are all journeys that we need to be on at different levels to deal with this, not as a waste, but as a benefit to our economies, our environment, and our societies. So thank you so much for giving that global perspective with some great numbers. We're now going to, like a drone, fly in from the global story into Europe, because there are a lot of exciting developments in policy and action underway here that could change, again, in a sense, the landscape of how we deal with wastewater in this region, and provide also perhaps some inspiration or some even help down the line to other parts of the world. First, let me introduce Chris Thornton, who is with the Secretariat of the non-profit European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform that brings together water and waste companies, mineral and organic fertilizer, chemical, animal byproducts companies, recycling technologies, knowledge institutes, and public establishments. I think if there was anything I missed there, I got it all in. Chris, your work is about promoting the implementation of sustainable phosphorus management in Europe. In particular, phosphorus recycling. Can you explain to us, in a sense now, what is the challenge facing Europe?
So I'm going to follow on from what Mansoor said. Wastewater contains nutrients, and one of the important nutrients that is in there is phosphorus. Why is phosphorus important? Because we all need it. It's essential for life. There's phosphorus in our genetic material. It's one of the main constituents of bones and teeth. It's essential for our nerve cells and our brain to function, for cells to process energy. And you can't replace it. You can replace oil with solar energy, but you can't replace phosphorus with anything else. But world resources are limited. And the EU in particular, Europe, is 90% dependent on imports. And that's why phosphorus is today on the EU's list of critical raw materials, with some 20 other minerals and metals. But at the same time, phosphorus is one of the biggest problems in terms of water quality, because it causes eutrophication. That means excess food for the algae in rivers. Algae grow and then they die, and that causes algal blooms, dead zones, kills fish. And that's why in the EU Green Deal, published last year, which outlines Europe's policy over the next 5 years, both the Farm to Fork and the biodiversity strategies announce to fix a target to reduce nutrient losses by 50% in the next 10 years. And that's why people have been recycling phosphorus for a long, long time. There's nothing new. The photos, for instance, show a collection of what was politely called night soil, which is basically pee and poo, which was collected in cities because it was an essential and valuable fertilizer. Basically, you can grow nitrogen in fields by planting crops like clover, which fix it from the air, but you can't grow phosphorus. If we don't recycle phosphorus, you have to replace it. And that's what happens. At the moment, we have a kind of one-way through system. 240 million tons of phosphate rock are dug out of the ground every year. That's about 20 million tons of the actual element phosphorus. Goes through the system, and most of it ends up in surface waters, creating eutrophication, or what the BBC very politely calls sea snot, this summer in the Marmara Turkish Sea. So we need to do something about it, and it's going to get worse with climate change. Climate change will accentuate eutrophication with higher global temperatures, reduced river flows in summer in many places, increased atmospheric carbon dioxide. That will all make algae grow faster, so that for the same amount of nutrient loss, you get bigger problems. But climate change will also increase the losses of phosphorus from land into surface waters. High rainfall events, and in many places in Europe, we know increasingly what that means, just as they do in the US with the hurricanes. And when you get these big high rainfall events, it washes the nutrients out of the soil into the river. And also the higher temperatures will also increase phosphorus losses. But then you have feedback, because eutrophication actually contributes to climate change. When the algae grow, they take up some CO2 from the atmosphere, which is nice. But then they die, sink to the bottom of the lake or the river, decompose, and emit methane. And methane emissions from waters, from fresh waters and the sea, are already a significant source of greenhouse gases and are likely to increase with increased eutrophication. So we definitely need to do something about it. Phosphorus recycling is essential. The good news is that much of Europe's phosphorus today is recycled. Most manure simply comes out the back end of the animal, goes back onto the field. And around half of Europe's sewage sludge is today used on fields as a fertilizer, taking organic carbon and nutrients back to soil. But there are obstacles to that. For sewage sludge, particularly problems with contaminants, PFAS, the fluorinated chemicals, a major contaminant problem in sewage sludge, as well as pharmaceuticals, microplastics. PFAS is in the process of being banned or regulated under the Green Deal and the chemical strategy in Europe. So the problem should get less, but pharmaceuticals and microplastics are kind of structural and will always be in sewage. So there are concerns about these contaminants. For agriculture, there are also pharmaceuticals in manure. And then there's the problem that when livestock production is concentrated, there's simply too much manure in the wrong place. And of course, it's shitty stuff to carry about. It's really difficult to transport. So we need to move forward on recycling. And in Europe, things are increasingly happening. Last year, the EU Fertilizing Products Regulation was published, and that, instead of just covering mineral fertilizers, as it did in the past, now covers recycled fertilizers. So that will open the market for recycled products. End of waste. changing recycled products from a waste status to a product is partly about societal acceptance, but it's also partly about regulation. Funding through the Horizon programs, LIFE, Interreg, to support research and development, and the Circular Economy Action Plan in the Green Deal, very important for taking forward recycling. And in the last month, we see that phosphorus recovery is included in the EU taxonomy, which is a rather strange word, but effectively means the sectors which have been identified as open for green investment. Germany and Switzerland have made phosphorus recycling obligatory, coming into implementation over the next 10 to 15 years. And technologies are today available. Easy Mining, who are organizing this conference, have available technologies and are building a plant. Other technologies are also being today built full scale. But what is needed is the economic and the regulatory incentives to take this forward. Recycling is more expensive. It's true for phosphorus, it's true for plastics, it's true for many things. On the other hand, it does actually create a lot more jobs, decentralized jobs in rural areas, jobs which you can't move out of Europe. And so we do need the economic or the regulatory incentives to ensure that the technologies which exist come into place. And there are various possibilities, recycling obligations, quotas for using recycled products, market incentives like we're beginning to see with the carbon border tax. So things are moving in Europe. We're very optimistic. There's a lot going on and there's a very positive future. Recycling is happening. Lastly, I'd just like to thank the companies and organizations who are members of our platform, who together believe that phosphorus recycling and better phosphorus management are tomorrow's future, and are working together between very different sectors, which makes it interesting and difficult to take this forward. So thank you very much. I look forward to the other speakers and to the different things that are coming out of today's discussion.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Chris. And funny enough, I was listening to the BBC radio out of London in my flat here in Berlin this morning, and some of the wildlife NGOs were talking about the problem of chicken poo, just too much being put on the land in the west of England and near the Wales, which was causing huge problems with algal growth in some of the major river systems there, and that just seemed a strange coincidence that we're having this show today. Now, Chris touched a bit on policy as well, which is why we're absolutely delighted to have with us Michel Sponard, who's the Deputy Head at the EU's Commission's Directorate for the Environment. He's leading a team of 22 people dealing with marine environment and water industry. His team is involved in several files, as they put it, such as the revisions of the Drinking Water Directive, the review of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, and the Bathing Water Directive, but also the implementation of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. I don't know if there's any other directives, but if they are to do with water in some way, I'm sure that Michel is managing that as well. Interestingly enough, I read that Michel's early career also assisted the government of the Seychelles on developing projects in the area of water, waste, and fisheries. Michel, we understand, as Chris alluded to, a lot of revisions in the pipeline to some of the key directives that cover this total issue of wastewater. Can you tell us what's happening, what might we look forward to? This issue that's at the center of our circular table talks today. Thank you very much, Michel.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation. Indeed, I can provide you with an angle from the European side. I must say that in the European Union, we have a very old but very effective directive, which is the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. The name is not extremely attractive, but in fact, behind this name, there is probably one of the most efficient directive never taken in terms of protecting the waters and managing and cleaning the the waters coming from domestic sources, but also urban sources. So before going into these details, I would like to mention that circular economy is certainly at the heart of the European project and the European Green Deal, which is our Bible for this Commission. In the Green Deal, you have a circular economy action plan, which was adopted 1 or 2 years ago now, and with a lot of actions to boost circular economy in the European Union. It's not only because we think that raw material will become, and is already a challenge, access to raw material is a challenge, and that we have to increase the independence of the European Union from that side, but it's also because it creates indeed jobs which are hard to delocalize, and also because simply by doing so we are reducing dramatically greenhouse gas emission. 1 ton of recycled material is by far less emitting greenhouse gas emission than extracting, mining it, and transforming it and processing and often transporting it to the European Union. So with our objective of the Green Deal to go to climate neutrality in the midterm, we need to use all the possibilities, and including increasing all what we can do for circular economy. That's absolutely clear. Having that said, we are now working on the review of this urban wastewater treatment directive, and we have made an evaluation to really have an assessment of what has worked and not worked with this directive. The results were published 1 year ago, and all in all, as I was mentioning, the beauty of this directive is that it's very simple to enforce and to apply. So we were able to follow and track and monitor progress in the member states. We were able also to provide economic incentive. European money, European funds were even created to support the implementation of this directive. I'm talking about 30 years ago, but the first cohesion funds were created to support Spain and Portugal at that time to increase their infrastructure and their wastewater collection and treatment. And at the same time, we had an enforcement and an implementation strategy which put in the European court those member states which were not implementing this directive. So this combination of carrot and stick was very efficient, and today most of the member states are compliant with the directive, and enormous progress have been done in the European Union, even if you still have some countries where the implementation remains difficult. I'm speaking about some member states having joined more recently the European Union. But I'm prudent there, because if you take the second wave of big enlargement of the European Union, enormous progress were made in a short time in the eastern countries of the European Union. Think about the Baltic countries, which are nearly fully compliant now in a record time compared to the other countries, but also Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. All these countries have made a lot of progress. I cannot mention all of them now. What is clear also from the evaluation is that we have to deal with new challenges. One of these challenges is the remaining pollution from the actual sources, and I'm talking about stormwater overflows or urban runoff. In a sense, we are capturing the dry wastewater during the dry time, but suddenly when you have a big rain, you have a lot of pollutants which can reach the rivers, and there we have to improve our system to really think about systems which are integrating water quality and water quantity management to capture this remaining pollution, because otherwise, a lot of efforts that were done and investment which are in place are simply jeopardized by this sudden pollution, which are, probably which will increase in the future due to the change of the regime of rains and due to climate change. Another new challenge is certainly the new pollutants, and there we are talking about micropollutants, including pharmaceuticals, but not only. These new pollutants are more and more present in the water and in the rivers, and are not well captured today by the existing treatment. So probably we need to move towards additional treatment where it makes sense, a fourth treatment for this micropollutant. And there we are thinking about different systems of producer responsibility, meaning those placing on the market products which are at the origin of this micropollutant should in a way or another contribute to the financing on the infrastructure to treat them. So that would be new in the sector of wastewater. It's well applied in the solid waste sector, but that's something that we are considering for the wastewater sector now. Also, emission of greenhouse gas and use of energy. I will come back on that. And probably a third important point is that we would like that the evaluation show that progress could be made in terms of transparency and governance. Today, you have large difference between operators in terms of access to information, but also in terms of performance. And we would like to find a way to improve that in the future. Now, coming back to where we stand in the review, we are now analyzing different scenarios and different policy options. And in our language in the Commission, before proposing any revision of legislation, we have to make an assessment of all its potential impacts. And that's where we are now. We are assessing different scenarios, different policy options and their impacts. And for circularity, we are working on three main angles. The first is to improve the energy use of these plants, but also of the collection system. Let me mention the example of Denmark. They are moving towards energy zero for the wool sector, and meaning that in a shorter time, it must be possible to move toward, this energy zero. We are assessing whether it would be possible to use this experience to expand it at the European level. If we go in that direction, it's absolutely clear that additional effort should be done also not only on auditing all the energy use at the different steps, but also to better use sludge and the sludge produced by the facilities, which, digestion probably is one of the things that could emerge if we go for energy zero in a mid-term for all the sector in the European Union. We are also thinking about how to reduce greenhouse gas emission from the sector, but probably the first step is to have a good picture of the situation. So for this review, probably we will move towards only energy and on greenhouse gas to simply find a way to better monitor greenhouse gas emission from the sector so that in a second time, we can progressively move towards zero greenhouse gas emission, but that would be in the midterm. It won't be for this review, it would be for a little bit later. Definitely, we will work on sludge management together with the Sewage Sludge Directive. We are working together with the colleague in charge of this directive. Probably the priority for us would be to do everything we can to push for reducing pollution at source, just to try to avoid that some pollutants are simply concentrated in the sludge. Because when they are in the sludge, it makes their use in agriculture a little bit more complex. And it was already mentioned, for instance, we have more and more signals and information on the concentration of microplastics in sludge, which make it difficult to use in agriculture afterward. In fact, it's a little bit even absurd. We are collecting these microplastics into the wastewater treatment plants. They are concentrated in the sludge, but if we spread this sludge after on the field, we have lost the advantage of capturing them in the wastewater treatment plants. This will come together with actions to reduce at source microplastics from different sectors, including textile, including tires and also plastic pellets. So all that goes together, action at source and action at the end of life. We will also push for sewage sludge a use which is conformed to the waste hierarchy. So meaning first prevention pollution at source, then reuse, then probably reuse recycling, and then in last resort, incineration or landfilling, which are two elimination techniques which are at the very bottom of the waste hierarchy. And we think that we should first favor the use of the noble use of this sludge, probably in agriculture with some pre-treatment and probably with some digestion at the beginning. But we have to respect the waste hierarchy, and that remains important because some member states now are moving to full incineration of this useful resource, and we think that it's not conform to the waste hierarchy. But their motivation is that precisely you can find pharmaceuticals or microplastics in this sludge, but we think that there is still a hope to try to capture that at source and to avoid this pollution at source. And then the third angle is to work more on water reuse. There is a regulation now which was adopted by the Council and the Parliament last year on water reuse, and we would like to give another boost, another push in the revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive to favor water reuse. So let me conclude by saying that all that will come early next year, the proposal of the Commission will be finalized and present to the Council and the Parliament. We were even thinking changing the name of the directive, something like Circular Water Recycling Directive, I don't know, but something which is in the air to really give the signal, even if, and I will conclude with that, it's absolutely clear that the main objective of this directive has to remain, which is make the water clean and before it's given back to the environment. So this objective is the first objective that we have, but it's clear that we have to put that in the context of the Green Deal and of the new and of the circular economy angle and approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michel, and that was really fascinating. What a huge job you have on your hands, and I think we wish you all the best with what you're doing. And I like the point very clearly that there are these industries out there that actually are part of the problem, and if they could handle their waste before it even gets to these water treatment or resource treatment works, it would make things surely a lot easier to harvest these materials. Thank you very much indeed. Now I've got the pleasure of introducing Caroline Worley, who is with the European Environment Agency. Caroline works at the European Environment Agency on chemicals in water, focusing particularly on the EU's urban wastewater treatment and water framework directives. Caroline, you're going to have the floor here to give us, in a sense, your perspective on where this is all going. What is your work focusing on, in a sense, and where do you think the opportunities are coming for making a more circular and sustainable Europe through the lens of water?
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction and for the really interesting talks that we've got today. I'm just going to sort of recap what we're doing here. Urban wastewater treatment and the circular economy is quite a mouthful, and I want to strip it back to the essentials. As animals, we eat and drink. What we don't use comes out as waste, feces, urine. It's a natural cycle. But what we call waste is a resource to plants and animals. Food, energy. So for a circular economy, we're looking to reflect that cycle. So we treat sewage to kill disease-causing organisms, to avoid too many pollutants going into rivers, lakes and seas. Urban wastewater treatment cleans the wastewater, but even so, discharges from treatment plants are major sources of pollution to Europe's surface waters. Sewage is not somebody else's problem. We all have a stake in treating it. We all want safe drinking water. We all want a safe environment. What we need is sustainable sewage treatment. Those of us lucky to have urban wastewater treatment probably don't think so much about it. We flush the toilet, we empty the sink, the waste goes away. What's happening is that sewers transport wastewater to the urban wastewater treatment plant. There, it's treated and released back to the environment. We're reflecting the natural water cycle. But this is a linear approach. In a circular economy, we must consider the full range of inputs and emissions from this process. So let's remind ourselves. To treat sewage, we take water from the environment to use in our homes and workplaces. We make the water dirtier, we clean it up, and then return it to the environment. Overlooking the energy used, the greenhouse gases released, in producing steel and concrete for sewers and treatment plants, in pumping and treating water. What comes out of the sewage treatment? Sewage sludge. We heard about it. It's organic matter produced by bacteria during treatment. Treated sludge can go to land where the nutrients are returned as part of a natural cycle. Circularity in action. However, only half the sewage sludge produced in Europe goes back to land. Why? Land's not always available. Maybe it's steep slopes or heavily populated areas. But a major reason is that we're worried about pollutants in the sludge. So the sludge is incinerated or landfilled. So which pollutants? Well, historically, we worried about metals from industry. In Europe, regulations already made this much lower. And now persistent organic compounds, so we heard about PFAS, these sorts of compounds are raising concern. But many of them are coming from our own homes in products and substances we use in our own homes. So we've painted ourselves into a corner. We treat the water in a linear water treatment process. We forgot about the other aspects, and we're reminding ourselves our aim here is to treat the sewage. We've brought in other things. Treatment has to address the local situation. The beauty for solutions for sewage treatment, if you don't mind that, is that every situation has its own solution. From one house to cities with millions of people, something for everyone. There's a solution for everyone. And we can become circular in our treatment of sewage. Towns and water operators are already experimenting, and how far we go with this depends on our ambition. Let's start with where we are. We can make our processes more energy efficient. We can reduce losses of greenhouse gases during treatment. We've heard about some of this already. Energy can be generated from sewage treatment. Anaerobic digestion to capture biogas, wastewater heat recovery, and these can fully power the treatment plant. This is circularity in action. Let's think a bit more deeply about this. Wastewater treatment reduces concentrations of nutrients to avoid harm to the environment. And at the same time, farmers are applying fertilizers to land to replenish nutrients taken up in crops, the same crops as need extra water. So of course, this is an opportunity. If we make sure that wastewater is safe, farmers can use it in irrigation, precious, nutrient-rich water, saving energy. And in Europe, legislation passed last year aims to do just that. And we've got more natural systems to treat wastewater. For example, constructed wetlands, where water is filtered through reed beds, solutions which use less energy, with a bonus because they can provide green space for citizens. How serious are we about circularity? Let's return to sewage sludge. Concern about pollutants stops it going to land. But why are those pollutants in wastewater from our homes? We need to change our use of chemicals so that harmful products are not in products we use at home. Let's avoid this problem. This approach is a major shift in how we would manage and use chemicals. In Europe, the chemical strategy for sustainability is setting the agenda here. And one of the main things is we have to ensure that alternatives are sustainable. What could full circularity look like? Already, innovative towns and operators are working out how to become more circular. We're hearing some of them today. They're building constructed wetlands. They're testing vacuum toilets. They're treating sewage on site. These new approaches won't immediately take over from existing wastewater treatment, not least because regulatory barriers need to be addressed. These barriers protect human health and the environment, and this protection must remain as our highest priority. Before the industrial age, night soil workers collected sewage. They took it to the fields, they used the nutrients. And for decades, we've recognised that sewage treatment is essential. Going forwards, we must ensure that in addition, sewage treatment is sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. And I love the fact that you referenced, what we actually use in our homes, because there is a human domestic story in here as well as a big industry story as well. And I think every person maybe has a role to play in this if the right products are available, hopefully at the right price. Finally, but not last and not least, we have Anna Lundborn. She's Marketing and Product Sales Manager at Easy Mining, which has its operations in Sweden and Germany. I love the name Easy Mining. It's a great name. Anna, tell us a bit more about what your company does and how your work is relevant to the wastewater challenge and the opportunities. Over to you.
Thank you, Nick. I'm really excited to be here today discussing this very important subject, focus area of easy mining. I will focusing on what we think is important that will change, and then afterwards you will get an introduction to our techniques. The way we see it is that if we're serious about creating a sustainable society, we have to start using the materials that we already have over and over again, as many times as possible. This might sound obvious, and it is. However, today, almost half of our climate impact and 90% of the water scarcity issues are linked to the way we extract resources and produce food, goods and food. We need to rethink and do it fast. We have to create new raw materials without exhausting our planet's resources and fuel our climate crisis. In the ongoing shift towards a circular economy, nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen are key. We need these nutrients to make sure that our fields yield enough food for the people of the world. And as we've been told earlier today, wastewater from households and industries contains massive amounts of both phosphorus and nitrogen. But today, the asset is seen as a problem due to eutrophication, for example. Wastewater treatment plants put great effort into getting rid of sludge, despite the fact that the sludge is rich on phosphorus. More than 50% is put on landfill or disposed otherwise. And this is wasting important resources. Nitrogen is released from wastewater treatment plants as nitrogen gas, but also as climate-damaging nitrous oxide, laughing gas. Phosphorus, listed by the European Union as a critical raw material, can be recovered from the sludge and brought back to the loop, securing an endless supply. Nitrogen can be captured from wastewater streams and used to produce fertilizers, replacing today's greenhouse gas heavy production. So why do we look at factories as places to produce things and wastewater treatment plants as places just to handle the garbage that we don't want to see? What if we could realize that these plants are factories too, producing the nitrogen and the phosphorus that we need to grow our food, but doing it from waste streams instead? With this approach, the wastewater treatment plants of today will be the resource plants of tomorrow. But it requires redefining the function of the wastewater facilities, and this in turn needs an overhaul of legislation and regulation everywhere, from securing a supply to creating a demand. We will present key solutions enabling lawmakers and public utility companies to address several problems at once and build a sustainable circular future. Technology exists, legislation update is needed. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Anna, for that presentation. And I think the whole world is looking forward to these resource treatment plants as a new dawn. But also, I also thinking about this session as well with Caroline, who brought in something that I'm very fond of, which is also working with nature as well to deal with these issues, including wetlands. All right, so this concludes the first part of our show on wastewater. Let's not waste a drop, or don't waste a drop, or let's never waste a drop, whatever we want to call it. But it's at the center of what we're talking about today. We're now going to flip into a panel discussion and some presentations from people who are actually working directly at these treatment areas, companies in different parts of Europe, and how they're actually dealing with this challenge. So I want to ask first Martin Quintelia, who's a process engineer at Aquafin NV in Belgium, where they treat water for some 5 million people. So Martin, you've heard a lot already in the discussions today, but tell us a bit about your work. Tell us how circularity is happening in respect to, say, your company and in your part of Europe, and whether you believe that we are heading towards a future, maybe of resource treatment plants rather than waste water treatment plants. Over to you, Martin.
Okay, I'm glad to do so, Nick. Nice to meet you all. So my name is Martijn. I'm a process engineer at Aquafin, and I will share some insight in the circular vision of our company. So as Nick already mentioned, we treat the household wastewater of 5.5 million people equivalents. And we do that by managing over 300 wastewater treatment plants. So as you can imagine, there are huge amounts of wastewater arriving at our treatment plants every day. And you can really look at this from two ways. The first way is the classical way, where you look at wastewater as a waste. But we are evolving more to a second way, a second view, where we look at wastewater as a resource. And from our point of view, there are three types of resources that can be recovered from wastewater. The first one, and the most obvious one, is clean, treated, purified water, which feeds the ecosystems and potentially can be reused for agriculture or industry. The second one is energy. Organic matter can be converted to biogas. This biogas can be produced, can produce electricity, or you can upgrade it to biomethane to inject it in the gas network, which is what we do at our treatment plant in Antwerp South. But it does not have to be at the wastewater treatment plant itself. For example, in the sewer system, there is a household wastewater flowing, which contains some heat. And via heat exchangers, we can extract this heat and use it to heat up households. Then the third resource that can be recovered are nutrients, for example, nitrogen and phosphorus. And I would like to go a little bit more into detail on this phosphorus, since it is listed on the EU list of critical materials and there is geopolitical scarcity. So every year, 3,600 tons of phosphorus arrives at our treatment plants. And an amazing 84% of this phosphorus is stored in the sludge. So what do we do with the excess sludge? In Flanders, for us, it is prohibited to spread the sludge on the land due to heavy metals and possible micropollutants. So what do we do with the sludge? It undergoes a series of treatment steps, starting with digestion, dewatering, drying, and it then goes to incineration. For the moment, this is 2/3 going to co-incineration and 1/3 going to mono-incineration. So this incineration will produce ashes, but the phosphorus is also there in these ashes. And what happens now is yearly 3,000 tons of phosphorus goes to waste because we landfill these ashes. But we have a plan, and the first step of this plan will be to build a new mono-incineration plant. Why mono-incineration? Because the recovery potential is the highest. When you compare it, for example, to co-incineration, with co-incineration, you dilute the sludge, you dilute the phosphorus content, which is not which we don't want. So therefore, we'll use mono-incineration, and we will build this plant by the year 2026 at the site of ArcelorMittal in Ghent. And there we will have some industrial ecology, because when we incinerate the sludge, the reaction is exothermic, and we will produce high-pressure steam. And ArcelorMittal will use this steam, and therefore they will reduce their CO2 footprint with 40,000 tons of CO2 equivalents on a yearly basis. So then we have this mono-incineration plant, which will produce ashes that contain phosphorus, and that can be extracted. So now we are looking into different business cases for this recovery of the phosphorus, and there are options. And the recovered product will be of a much better quality compared to raw pea rock. And they can be used as fertilizers, or can be upgraded in existing fertilizer plants to NPK fertilizers. However, these business cases for us, they are all negative, and we cannot compete with classical pea production from pea rock. However, we feel that when the legislation is right, this would allow us to recover 2,700 tons of phosphorus on a yearly basis, which is around 15% of what is lost in the phosphorus cycle in Flanders. And for us, the way forward will be through legislational changes, or changes in financial drivers, or will be a management decision at Aquafin. So the phosphorus is there, the technology is there, and let's not waste it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Martin. That was very interesting, and interesting that it's nice to hear the issue of cost, or how that will be managed, because, as you say, that can be part of policy incentives and other changes in the rules of the game that might allow these products to suddenly be competitive. So that's great. Stay with us, because we're going to have a short panel discussion after this. So now I'm going to go over to Dennis Thornberg, who's Innovation Manager in the Danish utility of Biofos. Is what is happening in Denmark as exciting as what's happening in Belgium? Because it sounds like there's some really cool things happening there. Give us your perspective, please.
Yeah, I think our story in Denmark is, thank you for being here, by the way. I think our story in Denmark, what I just heard from Martin, is quite parallel from Aquafin to what we're doing in Denmark in many ways. I see very much the urban wastewater treatment from an urban perspective. I think some of the statements that has been made today is that there is a variation actually between what we can do from the big cities and what we can do on the countryside, and then that's very different. And I'm not sure we're going to have one solution for everything, because I think there's a big difference what we want to do. I think we are already quite urban. We are also incinerating the sludge. So because we are in the big city, we cannot just put the sludge on farmland right next to us, because there is no such thing. And we cannot, I think also you have to look at, if you want to export resource water, you have to find a place to do it. We don't have any fields next to us again, so we don't have any place to put the water if we had some. So there are some perspectives on geography that has to be put into to discussion also. But I would like to just focus a little bit on the energy also, because we are, of course, very proud in Biofos that we are one of those who are producing energy. For each 100 units that we are using in the treatment plants, we are producing 170 units out from the plants. So we are actually very energy positive, and it's possible to do so from the wastewater treatment side. In Biofos, we are only doing the wastewater treatment. We are not we're not dealing with the sewers or the drinking water. So I think overall we are still energy neutral if we take that into account. But we are proud to be very energy positive. I think one of the things that does this is actually the incineration of sludge, because we can use the heat from the incineration in the Copenhagen system of district heating. So you need, of course, the grids in the city to export your energy forms. That's when you can become energy positive, because we can export our biogas to two systems, two grids in Copenhagen. We can export our heat to the district heating, and we can export what was the last one? Yeah, we can. So we have the electricity, of course. We can do that. Everybody can export electricity. So that's why we can become so energy positive. And we are working also on phosphorus. We have been incinerating for many years, so we have big piles of ash lying at our treatment plants, and we would like to make use of this. It's not only the phosphorus. We are together with Easy Mining. Actually, we've been looking into these issues of what to do with the phosphorus. Easy Mining has a very nice process now to deal with that. But we also have to look at the rest, what remains when we have extracted the phosphorus. There are some sand, basically silicium oxide, but and iron oxide and so on. There has to do something with that. We have also been doing experiment with a Danish consulting engineer and Easy Mining around cells to look at what can we do with this. Could it be used as cement replacement? So if we manage with all these things, we are actually reusing more or less everything from the wastewater. So that's a great thing, even though we are incinerating the sludge. Thank you.
That's really interesting, and I mean, again, stay with us for this panel discussion, because there's a few interesting questions that arise from what both you and Martin said. Finally, not least, we've got Christoph Ontid of the Division of Water Management at the company Gelsenwasser in Germany, in Deutschland. Yeah, maybe your journey is mirroring a little bit of what's happening in Belgium and in Denmark, although there probably are some national differences. And I think Germany came up before, didn't it, in the talk earlier about some new plans in terms of legislation within, was it 15 years? Maybe you can clear up that for me. Maybe I got it wrong. But tell us about your journey, Christoph. It sounds fascinating.
Thanks a lot, Nick, for this kind introduction. At first, I'd like to introduce Gelsenwasser. Gelsenwasser is a 134 years old municipally owned company for drinking water supply, wastewater management, and energy supply. We have numerous holdings and operational management throughout Germany. The head office is located in Gelsenkirchen. For us, sustainable management has top priority. In order to protect natural resources, it's particularly important for us to avoid waste, close material cycles, and save energy. I have some examples for our sustainable activities on our wastewater treatment plants. In these treatment plants, we treat wastewater of more than 4 million people. The highest electricity consumption of a sewage treatment plant is in the activated sludge stage. A large amount of air or oxygen is introduced there with the help of air compressors. By optimization this aeration stage and improving the efficiency of these machines, the electricity consumption can be significantly reduced. In addition to saving energy, the energetic utilization of the sludge is also an important factor. This enables anaerobic sludge stabilization in a digester. We use this technology at all our sewage treatment plants to optimally utilize the energy content of the sewage sludge. We catch the sludge in a digester and store the emerging methane, which is released out of the sludge, and use it energetically to generate electricity and heat. In combination with the optimization of energy consumption, anaerobic sludge stabilization can lead to the sewage treatment plant being largely self-sufficient in electricity. Not by 100%, but I think nearly 70–80% is possible. The digested sludge is the basis of subsequent incineration. This leads us to the legal requirements in Germany since 2017 that by 2029, municipal sewage sludge may no longer be used in agriculture or landfill, but must be incinerated. In order to still be able to use the fertilizing effect of the sludge, the phosphorus contained in the sludge is also to be recovered. Due to this legal requirement, a large of research projects were initiated in Germany in order to have suitable processes for phosphorus recycling in place to be in time for 2029. Gelsenwasser began developing its own plant projects for sewage sludge incineration and phosphorus recycling at a very early stage at 2012. Today, we are building 2 mono incineration plants for municipal sewage sludge, one in Bitterfeld-Wolfram in eastern Germany and one in Bremen in northern Germany. The sludge out of these incineration plants will produce 45,000 tons of ash per year that must be subjected to phosphorus recycling. And what to do now? we are glad that we find a solution in our cooperation with Easy Mining. We cooperate since 2018 with Easy Mining, which has the corresponding patent of Ash2Phos. Together, Easy Mining and Gelsenmoser are currently planning the first large-scale phosphorus recycling plant in Germany using the Ash2Phos patent. This plant should go in operation by 2024 and be start of a series of other in Germany. We want to treat at the end more than 300,000 tons of ash in Germany nearly around the year of 2030. So this is a very big goal for us, and we're looking forward to reach this goal of Gelsenmoser and Easy Mining. And let's talk about this in 2024, what we reached by then. So I'm now at the end, and thank you to give some examples of Gelsenmoser's sustainable activities.
Thank you very much indeed, Christoph. And that sounds like a major undertaking, but maybe with a huge impact in a positive way on the environment. We're going to have a short 5-minute panel debate here, and I'd like to ask Jan Svard, who came in at the beginning here, to actually join us in this and perhaps field some of the questions that come through. Because I think a lot of questions have been raised in a sense about what's going on here. And I think one of the challenges seems to be that so often with all environmental challenges and circular economy challenges, there is an extra cost for those people that are pioneering some kind of ambitious change. And I wonder how, expensive is it to move to this circularity? Do you think there's anything in the European Union proposals, anything at domestic level that can, in a sense, provide incentives to make these kinds of changes happen? Who would like to talk about the costs here?
Well, I can give a short word, and I think, of course, because these are the contamination, and to take away contamination always costs. But I always draw the parallel in a mine, and the only mine basically in Europe, the phosphorus content is 1.8 to 2%. In ash, it's 9%. And then, of course, in addition, there is heavy metals and other things. So there needs to be a process to take away the contaminants. In the linear economy, they don't have to pay for it today. So I think that's it really needs to be, to these processes to get started, it needs to be a level playing field, as we say, and which there is not today. I think that's key. And then, of course, there is a certain cost to be the first one on the market with this, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But just coming back on that, who is going to create the level playing field? I mean, obviously there are economies of scale that help in the end, but I mean, Germany, with renewable energy powered forward on that. So did Denmark with Vestas. They brought down the price of renewable energy. Then it was actually cheap for the Chinese and others then to also invest in that. So somebody has to be a leader, but there has to be some kind of incentive to help. And do you think the policies that are coming through from the Commission and so on, I see Michelle is still with us, could help in a sense with those kinds of incentives? Where do you look as an industry and as thinkers of this topic?
To some extent, I think the biggest issue that we have today, and coming back to that, is that when you do the final product, the phosphorus product that comes in this process is actually much cleaner than the linear products, and it has less heavy metals and other contaminants. But for many applications, it's not legal to use. I think that's one of the key variables. And so we really strive for a legislation that is not, this legislation is 50 years old or 60, even, 30 in some cases, but it's based on the origin, where it comes from, and not on the quality of the final product. And that is something turned. That's the really important way to create a level playing field. So then you will also be paid for the quality in this case. It's a key element for the whole process.
Indeed, this is also the issue that we have in our business case, because to reach the full price potential of the recovered products, the legislation has to be right. For example, at the use of these recovered phosphorus products in animal feed, the legislation does not allow it at the moment. And I think also Easy Mining is working on it, if I'm correct.
What does, in other areas of life, people do pay premium products or premium price for certain things, don't they? I mean, they pay a premium price slightly for organic food, for example, over, say, mass-produced food. There are other things. So, I mean, is there a market out there? Are there farmers, for example, or others who value this high-quality product, are prepared to pay a little bit more, or is that just wishful thinking by me?
From my point of view, this has to be pushed by regulation. For example, this high cadmium content and high uranium content that is in the ashes, by setting up some stricter cadmium contents or minimal blending obligations, you will already fix a lot of issues, I think.
I think the blending obligation is a really big opportunity to pave the way for this. But I also think that, Jan, you should mention maybe the phosphorus is so clean that you can actually go higher in the pyramid of products, that maybe if you can use it for feed instead of just fertilizer, because it's actually too good to be used as fertilizer. So it should be, if you can make clean products with a high quality and a constant quality, you can get more value out of it. So that's where we have to work on that.
That sounds like the endless challenge of the water industry. You produce all this wonderfully clean water, which we then put in our toilets and flush down the drain. And here you're making phosphorus that's so clean that it's just too good, right? So you guys are you're doing too good a job actually with some of the things you're dealing with. But let me ask another question then, which is, there was something that Mansour raised, of course, at the beginning on the global perspective. I mean, do you guys feel that, and ladies too with Anna and Caroline, do you feel that some of the things we're learning in Europe about how to deal with this circular economy and wastewater has some possibility for export to the developing world? That would sound like a for-profit thing, but with, say, support of the European Commission with its overseas development support funds, or other governments that would want to support people in poorer countries? Are we learning things in Europe that have value elsewhere?
At first, I have to say, in Europe, there is no one quality standard. In fact, if you see the stages of wastewater treatment plants in Europe from north to south, is a very, very big difference. So at first, we have to get the same technical standard in Europe, which is today not there. And then after this, we can talk about a standard of treat sludge and other things. So it's a very not easy discussion today about sludge incineration or bringing sludge into agriculture. A lot of, especially the southern countries in Europe, want to bring the sludge in the future in the landfill and in the agriculture, and are not. They don't want to treat them in incineration. So there's a big difference in Europe. So I don't see anything to export as a European thinking, but we can do it from the countries which are in front, as Scandinavian countries and maybe Netherlands, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
Yeah. Can I maybe add? So of course, these are three very progressive companies as well. That's early on this, and they doing things even before legislation require it. Then some companies, of course, will wait until it's absolutely required. The other point I would say, we almost should not call what this mono incineration. We should maybe not even call it incineration, because it's in the old waste hierarchy. This was, of course, the end, the final solution if you couldn't do anything else. But in this case, it's actually part of the process. It's in the middle of the process for recovering nutrients, and to concentrate the nutrients up to a concentration so it actually can be recovered. And it's also for, clean up from organic materials and pharmaceuticals and microplastics and so on. So it will make it much more recoverable. So it's a different mindset than it was when incineration of waste in general, I would say, that is required here.
I think we're coming a bit to the end of the show now. I think I only really have one last thought that seems to come out all the time. One was slightly captured by Caroline with, talking about what products people use in the home. And then there's the even bigger sort of elephant in the room, which is the huge pharmaceutical industry and the products it produces and what happens in our economies and our environment with those products. And then, of course, farming itself, that's another area. And plastics, which, of course, is in part linked with the fossil fuel industry, but also with the, many other industries too. I mean, as companies and as people that are progressive like this and as associations of organizations, etc., how does one deal with that other side of the story? Because if there was less pharmaceuticals pouring in, less heavy metals, less microplastics, you would all have a much easier job, wouldn't you? Or is it just not possible to deal with that huge challenge? Chris, I know you're not part of the panelists, but you're shaking your head that there isn't an argument in this, and maybe you're right. I'm just curious.
Well, I think you have to be very careful. If you ask me whether I'm going to stop taking the drug which keeps my tension down and possibly stops me having a heart attack because it gets into sewage, then much as it would be nice to say yes, the answer is clearly going to be no. And if you're designing pharmaceuticals, making them biodegradable is very low on your list of priorities. For obvious reasons. You want them to work and you want them to not have secondary effects. So I think what we can work on in Europe is looking at how safe these products really are. I mean, there are things that you can avoid in sewage, and PFAS and the industrial chemicals. Yeah, okay, if Teflon from pans and PFAS used in lubricants is getting into sewage, then ban it. It's simple. If it's a problem, it shouldn't be there. But things like pharmaceuticals, microplastics are also much more complicated because it's very difficult to see how you can trap microplastics from which are just wear of textiles. But what we can work on in Europe is really doing serious investigations into whether these materials are in fact a safety problem when you spread them on fields. Because part of the difficulty is if we get into a mental vision where you can't spread anything on a field that's ever been a waste, then you end up having no circular economy because society rejects it. And that is one of the biggest problems that we actually see is the societal rejection. It's a waste, we don't want it.
Okay. All right, Chris. Well, thanks for chipping in on that. I mean, I'm always an evergreen optimist, having in the 1990s for 13 years been the Times newspaper's environment and science correspondent, and people used to laugh about renewable energy in the 1990s, when a unit of solar power was it $50 or something? It was some crazy price. And everybody went, that's never going to happen. In fact, the UK government cancelled its total renewable energy program on the grounds that it would never make any money. Anyway, now at least they're putting wind turbines in the North Sea. But so I'm an optimist that technology and science can resolve some of these issues. Look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Thanks for the panelists for sticking around at the end. I want to I'll just reflect a little bit on this. I'd like Per Larssons to come in, my co-host here. Per, give me some thoughts about what you've heard today and give us your expert perspective.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all the speakers. What I've heard today is that there are a lot of optimistic thoughts in the room. I do believe there are good ambitions. We like to do things. I heard the expression of that incineration is a treatment method to enable recycling. I think that is something that we need to more deeply into. We have seen an ambition from the wastewater treatment plant making sure that they really want to be the forerunner. At the same time, as I say that the policymakers in Europe, you need to put the policies in place. Easy Mining is innovation where we have a phosphorus solution that can be used even as a feed phosphate because of the high quality if policymakers enable us to do it. So origin should not be the qualifying factor. It should be quality. And if we can do that, I think we will have a circular economy. And Martin's challenge when it comes to the economy and the business case will be much easier to deal with. How can we use quality instead? And that is my end message.
Well, thanks very much, Per, and thank you everybody again for being on the programme. I hope that the people watching the show that maybe didn't know much about wastewater understand now that we are actually throwing away a potentially fantastic resource for our economies, for our environment, and also in terms of job creation, because once you make things a little bit more interesting in terms of how you manage them, you need people. And with 7 billion people on the planet going to 10 billion, we've got to find work for people as well. So that's important too. And I hope that, Michel and his team at the European Commission, they look to be doing a great job, can maybe pick up some of the comments that were made today on what needs to be done. I love the idea that we also need to work with nature and not against it when we think about transforming water treatment into resource plants. I look at the word plants because that means machines, but it also means things that grow in the soil. So I like the idea of resource plants. So please tune in to the next Circular Table Talks in a few months' time when we plan to discuss a new topic to be decided. Thank you very much indeed.